Long before Columbus set foot in the so-called New World, great civilizations thrived. Towering Maya cities, vast trade networks, and fierce warriors roaming the Great Plains. But with the arrival of Europeans, a brutal struggle for survival began. How did these ancient cultures fall? How did Native Americans resist centuries of war, disease, and forced removal? This is the story of a people who refused to disappear. Welcome back to our channel where we dive deep into the fascinating world of Native American culture and history. In today's video, we'll be exploring the rich and diverse history of Native Americans, from their early beginnings to their enduring impact on American society today. Section 1. The Ancient Native Civilizations. The history of Native Americans, often referred to as the Indians, dates back over 15,000 to 30,000 years, when their ancestors migrated from Siberia to the Americas via the Bering Land Bridge during the last ice age. Over thousands of years, these early settlers spread across North and South America, developing unique cultures, languages, and societies adapted to their diverse environments. Some of the most advanced pre-Columbian civilizations included the Mound Builders, Mississippian culture, built massive earthen structures like Cahokia, modern Illinois, a city that once housed 40,000 people around 1000 to 1400 AD. The Ancestral Puebloans, Anasazi, constructed cliff dwellings in the American Southwest and developed advanced irrigation systems. The Maya, Aztec, and Inca flourished in Central and South America with astronomy, mathematics, and engineering skills that rivaled those of the Old World. Native American societies ranged from nomadic hunter-gatherers to powerful empires, each with distinct religious beliefs, governance systems, and artistic traditions. Section 2. The Great Plains and Nomadic Tribes. In the vast Great Plains, stretching from modern Canada to Texas, native tribes such as the Lakota, Sioux, Cheyenne, Comanche, and Blackfoot developed a nomadic lifestyle centered around buffalo hunting. Before the arrival of Europeans, these tribes hunted on foot, using bows, spears, and coordinated group strategies. The introduction of horses by the Spanish in the 16th century transformed their way of life, making them expert riders, skilled warriors, and highly mobile societies. Horses allowed them to expand their hunting grounds and travel greater distances, engage in intertribal warfare more effectively, develop warrior societies where status was earned through bravery and battle. Spirituality was deeply tied to nature, with many tribes worshiping the Great Spirit, performing vision quests, and holding sun dance ceremonies to seek guidance and strength. Section 3. The First Contact with Europeans. The arrival of Christopher Columbus in 1492 marked the beginning of European contact with Native Americans, leading to profound changes. The Spanish, French, English, and Dutch soon followed, establishing settlements and trade routes. While some tribes, such as the Powhatan Confederacy in Virginia, initially traded with Europeans, relationships quickly turned violent due to land disputes and resource competition. The Columbian Exchange brought new weapons and tools, guns, iron, metal knives, that changed warfare in daily life, horses which revolutionized transportation and hunting, deadly diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza, wiping out up to 90% of some native populations within decades. Many tribes were displaced, and their lands were rapidly claimed by European settlers, setting the stage for centuries of conflict. Section 4. The Impact of Colonization and Early Wars. As European colonies expanded, conflicts erupted between settlers and Native American tribes, leading to some of the bloodiest wars in early American history. Pequot War, 1636 to 1638. English colonists and their native allies destroyed the Pequot people in present-day Connecticut. King Philip's War, 1675 to 1678. Led by Metacom, King Philip, Wampanoag warriors fought to drive the English out of New England, but were ultimately defeated. Pontiac's Rebellion, 1763 to 1766. A resistance movement against British expansion after the French and Indian War, led by Chief Pontiac of the Ottawa. Many tribes formed alliances with European powers, choosing sides in colonial struggles such as the French and Indian War, 1754 to 1763, which saw different tribes supporting either the British or the French. Section 5. The Trail of Tears and Forced Removals. By the 19th century, the United States government aggressively expanded westward under the policy of manifest destiny, believing it was their divine right to control the continent. This led to the forced displacement of Native American tribes. The most infamous event was the Indian Removal Act of 1830, signed by President Andrew Jackson, which led to the Trail of Tears, 1838 to 1839. The forced relocation of the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and Seminole from their ancestral lands in the southeastern U.S. to Indian Territory, present-day Oklahoma. Thousands died from disease, starvation, and harsh conditions along the journey. Similar removals occurred across the country, leading to the loss of native lands and the destruction of traditional ways of life. Section 6. The Indian Wars and the Last Resistance. From the mid-19th to the late 19th century, Native American tribes fiercely resisted U.S. expansion. Some of the most famous battles and leaders included Red Cloud's War, 1866 to 1868, led by Chief Red Cloud, Oglala Lakota, successfully resisting U.S. forts on Sioux lands. Battle of Little Bighorn, 1876. Also known as Custer's Last Stand, where Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse led a coalition of Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors to defeat General George Custer. Nez Perce War, 1877. Chief Joseph led his people on a 1,400-mile retreat before surrendering. Despite their bravery, most resistance movements were crushed, leading to the loss of native sovereignty. Section 7. The Wounded Knee Massacre and the End of an Era. By the late 19th century, Native American resistance was nearly eradicated due to relentless military campaigns and government policies. The final tragic event that symbolized the end of Native armed resistance was the Wounded Knee Massacre on December 29, 1890. This massacre occurred as the U.S. Army attempted to disarm a Lakota group led by Chief Bigfoot at Wounded Knee Creek in South Dakota. Tensions were high due to the growing ghost dance movement, a spiritual practice that sought to restore native lands and drive out European settlers. The Lakota had surrendered peacefully, but during the disarmament process, a deaf man named Black Coyote allegedly resisted giving up his rifle, leading to a chaotic exchange of gunfire. Within minutes, the 7th Cavalry Regiment opened fire on the unarmed Lakota, using Hotchkiss cannons to mow down men, women, and children. Over 300 Lakota were killed, many as they fled across the snow-covered plains. Survivors were left to freeze overnight before being buried in a mass grave. The massacre was one of the darkest moments in U.S. history, marking the definitive end of armed native resistance. While the government justified it as an act of self-defense, it was later recognized as a mass killing of civilians. Wounded Knee became a symbol of Native American oppression, remembered as the moment when centuries of resistance were finally crushed. The event also marked the end of the Indian Wars, as there were no longer large-scale Native uprisings afterward. Section 8. Life on Reservations and Cultural Suppression. With military resistance destroyed, Native Americans were forcibly confined to reservations, areas of land designated by the U.S. government where they were expected to live under strict regulations. These reservations were often located on poor-quality land, unsuitable for farming or hunting. Many tribes were forcibly relocated far from their ancestral lands, breaking their cultural and spiritual connections to the land. Conditions on reservations. Food rations were inadequate, leading to malnutrition and starvation. Government agents controlled tribal affairs, often corruptly managing resources. Religious and cultural practices were banned, including sacred ceremonies and the speaking of native languages. The economy was limited, forcing many natives into poverty and dependency on government aid, assimilation policies, and boarding schools. In an attempt to eliminate native identity, the U.S. government implemented policies to assimilate Native Americans into Euro-American culture. The Dawes Act, 1887, divided tribal lands into private plots for individual ownership, breaking communal traditions. Any remaining land was sold to white settlers, causing tribes to lose millions of acres. Native boarding schools. Native children were taken from their families and sent to government-run schools, such as the infamous Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania. Students were forced to cut their hair, change their names, and abandon their languages and traditions. Physical punishment was common for those who refused to assimilate. Kill the Indian, save the man was the philosophy behind these schools. These policies deeply scarred Native communities, causing the loss of language, traditions, and family structures that are still being reclaimed today. Section 9. Native American Rights Movements. Despite years of oppression, Native Americans began to fight back in the 20th century through legal battles, activism, and political movements. The Indian Citizenship Act, 1924. In an attempt to integrate Native Americans into U.S. society, Congress passed the Indian Citizenship Act, granting all Native Americans U.S. citizenship. However, many states still denied them voting rights for decades. The Indian Reorganization Act, 1934. Also known as the Indian New Deal, this law ended the Dawes Act's land allotment policy, stopping further land losses, allowed tribes to establish self-government and manage their own affairs, provided funds for education, healthcare, and economic development. The American Indian Movement, AIM, 1968. Frustrated by continued oppression, Native activists formed AIM, a militant group that fought for Native rights, sovereignty, and the restoration of stolen lands. The occupation of Alcatraz, 1969 to 1971. AIM activists occupied the abandoned Alcatraz Island for 19 months, claiming it under an old treaty that allowed Native use of surplus government land. The protest brought national attention to Native struggles. The Wounded Knee Protest, 1973. AIM occupied Wounded Knee, South Dakota, for 71 days, demanding the U.S. government honor old treaties. It ended in violence with 2 Native activists killed. Native legal victories. The Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act, 1975, restored some control over tribal affairs. The Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, 1990, allowed tribes to reclaim ancestral remains and sacred artifacts from museums. These movements led to greater tribal sovereignty and a resurgence of Native pride. Section 10. Modern Native American Life and Cultural Revival. Today, Native American communities are actively reviving their cultures, reclaiming lost traditions, and fighting for justice, economic development, and sovereignty. Many tribes operate successful businesses such as casinos, tourism, and resource management. The Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, 1988, allowed tribes to run casinos on reservations, providing billions in revenue for Native communities. Language and cultural revival. Tribal nations are investing in language revitalization programs, teaching children traditional languages such as Navajo, Lakota, and Cherokee. Powwows and traditional ceremonies have made a strong comeback, celebrating Native identity and history. Ongoing challenges. Despite progress, Native communities still face significant challenges. High poverty and unemployment rates due to limited economic opportunities. Healthcare crises, including high rates of diabetes, alcoholism, and inadequate medical facilities. Land and treaty disputes, as many tribes continue to fight for stolen land and the protection of sacred sites. However, Native Americans today remain resilient, blending traditional knowledge with modern activism to protect their cultures and ensure a strong future for coming generations. As we come to the end of our journey through Native American history, we hope you have gained a deeper appreciation for the rich and diverse cultures of indigenous peoples. From their early beginnings to their enduring impact on American society, Native Americans have shown resilience, strength, and perseverance in the face of adversity. By learning about their history and supporting their struggles for justice and recognition, we can honor the legacy of indigenous peoples and work towards a more inclusive and equitable world for all. Thank you for joining us on this exploration, and don't forget to subscribe our channel and like the video to stay tuned for more fascinating stories from the past on our channel. Until next time, take care and keep exploring.